All right, everybody, we're going to get started. And so, welcome everyone to this impromptu webinar, The Five Transformations Mighty Taskers Make. And as just a little bit of background for everybody, what had happened was we held Productivity Summit 2019, and Francis Wade of Two Time Labs, who's here with me, hi Francis, he presented two different sessions covering the first four transformations. And so I've actually embedded those inside of the Personal Productivity Club event. So you should see both of those sessions that you can watch and kind of catch up. And even if you have not seen those, this will still be useful to you, but just know that those are there waiting for you to see. And so with that, this is the fifth transformation that mighty taskers, as Francis kind of defines it. And so, Francis, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks who are watching, and then pull up your slides, and let's get started.
Sure. My latest incarnation, my latest project is the Time Blocking Summit. And much of what I'll be sharing with you today actually comes from ideas that will be shared on the summit, which starts next week. So I'm going to share my slides. And I think that's the right page. Ray, you can let me know if that's the wrong one. But there are five transformations.
Okay, so first, I'm sorry, just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to be in the chat, so if you have any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat. I'm going to hold those for Francis to the end, and so go ahead and get started, Francis. I'll be in the chat, and I'll take it away.
Okay, let me see if I can actually see the chat while you're doing that. Yes, I think I can. Okay, great. A mega tasker is someone who manages lots and lots of tasks. And you probably are here in the productivity club because you're someone who actually manages a lot of tasks. So today's presentation is for you and for the kinds of people who also come to time blocking summits and people who read books like Getting Things Done. And there are people who tend to be ambitious and very driven. And so here are the five transformations that we make. And I say we because I'm also a part of the club. I've been a member for probably about a year, I guess. But let's start off with a question. Do you have a feeling that you need to make some changes to your setup, to the way you manage your practices, the apps you use, the habits you've picked up, the philosophies that you have in play? If you have that nagging thought that it's time to make some changes, apart from those of us who just like to change lots and lots of things and lots of times because we like the thrill of it, most of us are prompted to make changes by unwanted symptoms. In other words, we have things happening that we don't want to happen. So for me, the classic is I make a commitment to something, to myself usually, and then I forget that I made it. And then time passes and I realize sometime later that, hang on, I dropped the ball. So basically it slipped through the cracks. So that's the task disappear symptom. And that for me is the one that I hate the most and the one that tells me that I need to make some changes. But you may have others. So you may have a pop-up, and a pop-up is that awful moment at 1 o'clock in the morning when you jump out of your sleep and all of a sudden you remember something that you were supposed to do and you didn't do. And your heart starts racing, palms get sweaty, and you wonder, you pick up your phone, can I do something about it? No, is it too late? And that panic sets in. But there are others. There's also feelings of just being distracted. You perhaps may see yourself multitasking, and that's something that you haven't done in a while. Maybe your reputation is taking a hit, that people are getting to know you as someone who they can't rely on. Maybe you're running late all the time and have a feeling of not catching up. Perhaps your email is telling you that something is a little bit off because all of a sudden your inbox, which was fine up until last week, has exploded. Or it might be an emotional feeling of overwhelm. That also is a signal for some that there's time to make some changes and something needs to give, something needs to be examined and moved around. And Perhaps you have put on some extra pounds, telling you that your life has gone out of whack a bit because all of a sudden you're not exercising as much as you should or eating the way you want. And finally, maybe you feel some guilt. People are relying on you and you're not providing the goods. So will, and you're concerned, will, as I look to the future, will I struggle to find answers to what I need to do? Because it's not immediately apparent that, and it's not easy to understand, especially when you're someone who's in the productivity club. You've been through productivity 101, 201, 303, 405. You've been through multiple levels of learning. And at this point, it's not easy to find what to improve next. So typically, we fall into either hope, which is either trying harder or maybe doubling down on whatever approach we're currently using, or we just ignore it. Just hope maybe it'll just go away. Maybe this is temporary. And that actually does work sometimes. And I'll explain why in a minute. But sometimes we just quit. I've seen people quit jobs, quit relationships, quit clubs, quit hobbies, cut back on their aspirations. Or in other words, start to say a big no to some of the things that they really want to accomplish in life, just because they now believe that that's the source of the unwanted symptoms. It's not, though, as we'll see in a moment. So there's a key assumption, and that key assumption is maybe you might say it's a primary reason why when people experience unwanted symptoms, they have a very difficult time. And the key assumption that they bring to the party is one that they use for other kinds of problems, which is that there's got to be a simple solution to this. And you hear that vein of thinking or that theme when you read productivity content, which says, this is really simple, or this is easy, or it's just 3 steps, or you can implement this right away, or this is a hot tip that will take no effort or no practice. There's a tendency for us to make solutions sound simple. But in this world, that approach actually doesn't work. There's something basic that's missing that makes simple solutions not work. And I'm here today to tell you that the reason simple solutions don't work in the area of task management in particular is because there's a hidden improvement dynamic. There's something hidden in the way that we manage our tasks as human beings that's not apparent, that we are not taught. It's not written very much. It is buried in some academic research because I see glancing references to it, but that's not even curated in a way that you can understand or pick up easily unless you read a whole bunch of papers and understand where they're coming from and what the common knowledge is that they're basing their conclusions on. So what's this human hidden improvement dynamic? We'll get to it today. I'll tell you what it is in just a few minutes, but I'm going to tell you why no one understands this dynamic. Like I said, there's not enough applied research. A lot of it is theoretical, based on incorrect premises. We bring to it a stubbornness that what we're doing should work. We've picked up an approach that we've either learned from someone, copied from someone else, taught ourselves, or become stuck or wedded to a particular way of doing things. And sometimes even defensive that any other way could be the right way. We become a little bit dogmatic. And that stops us from seeing this hidden improvement dynamic. And then finally, there's also a thought that we're just doing whatever we're doing wrong, and we need to find out how to do it right. So pick up a book says do A, B, and C. You do A, B, and C, it doesn't work for you, and you think, I must be doing A, M, and P, not A, B, and C. So there's a additional push to find and do A, B, and C. But the truth is, you're already doing A, B, and C. A, B, and C doesn't actually work for you. And what's at play is this hidden improvement dynamic. So what it would be like is that if we were able to crack this problem, the symptoms actually would go away. And the core idea is that the hidden improvement dynamic is that the symptoms increase as task volume increases. That's a big part of it. That's the initial understanding that we bring to the table, that these symptoms don't go away when, for example, you put in place the wrong kind of improvement. Instead, they scale. They increase as task volume goes up. So that's a clue to us that maybe this dynamic operates in a particular way in which maybe we need to pay attention to task volume. Now, some may say you need to pay attention to personality and culture. Um, I've had people say it depends on the industry, the kind of job you have. And today we're going to focus on something different, which is that it has something to do with task volume. So maybe if we solve the challenge today of figuring out this dynamic and how it plays into task volume, perhaps we could actually solve the problem today and get some freedom and create a sense of hope that it's not just a lost cause. And if you find yourself wanting to be rid of these unwanted symptoms and this nagging feeling that you need to change something, maybe ahead of you, you could actually see a future in which you could stay ahead of future issues, where perhaps you can see where you'd be happy today with the solution, you could fix it. But then in the future, with more tasks coming, in other words, greater task volume, maybe you could solve the problem for the future as well. And you could go to feeling actually confident and secure that as the tasks increase, you have a flexible way of dealing with them. So I can't say that I came to what I'm telling you through any bit of brilliance or any, it really was for me a series of the blind leading the blind, which is me leading myself because I found myself zigzagging between different techniques. And it was only about 5, 6 years after I made a number of zigs and zags that I discovered this hidden improvement dynamic I'm going to be sharing with you. And the fact that it has something to do with task volume. I had no idea. I just basically was going after whatever sounded good, whatever book was really popular at the time, whatever people were saying. And that was what that was the cue, those were the cues that I was using to make my improvements. So if this resonates with you any at all, here are the 3 points that I say would cause us to create a new sense of hope. Because I'm out today again, not to just solve the current issue that you're dealing with, but to give you a lasting sense of an open-ended sense that there could be solutions coming. They haven't perhaps all been invented yet, but with the right frame of mind, you could actually be open to them and have them make a difference. And to do that, we're going to work on a focus on 3 topics. One is reinterpreting history, which is your history, my history. A second is to understand the nature of these transformations. And then the third is very practical, which is to implement your transformation. So, as you probably know, one size doesn't fit all. And if you probably wouldn't be in the productivity club if you didn't agree to some extent that there is no one perfect combination of practices, apps, and devices that everyone should use. Now, some may argue that it doesn't matter. I'm here to say today in this presentation that it does. And to introduce an idea that at different task volumes, you need different combinations in order to cope. So according to the research, there is a move away from thinking that there's one way to do time or task management. And the research, thankfully, is starting to say that there are multiple solutions, and they depend on factors. Some people believe that it has to do with age, but there's some research, more recent research that says that, well, yes, there is a change in the way you manage your tasks from the time when you had a skateboard to the time when your hair started to turn a little bit gray. But it's more nuanced than just thinking that it's random or it's due to the age. Instead, research I've done says that it depends on task volume. And in fact, when I led my training, first time management training in the early 2000s, so my mother said to me, she took my training, and afterwards I said, so Mom, how was it? Talk to her maybe a month later. Are you using all the things that you learned? And she said, well, no, not really. And I said, what? Because, this was my baby, right? This program. I don't have kids, so this is my baby. And she said, well, I'm retired. I'm not using, I don't need to use all of that stuff. And the program was built on the idea that everyone should follow one set of habits, practices, and even use similar devices, even use similar language. And I was appalled. I tried to talk her out of it. And I said a bunch of stuff. No, but you should because blah, 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 blah. And, she gave me kind of the motherly nod and said, yeah. She didn't change her behavior, but she acquiesced in the moment. But what she was saying is that if you look at the chart in front of us, is that she was at combo 5. She had selected a new set of practices that were appropriate for her task volume, and that it was a lot lower now that she was aged maybe 65 than when she was 55. The kids had moved out by then. She had retired, and she didn't have the same number of tasks that she had before. So what the chart is showing is that you could actually pick a combo at number 4 that manages a lot of tasks, but then it goes down when you retire. Some research showing this. So if you keep adding tasks, the big message today is that there is a predictable pathway that you would follow. So you may see that I changed the slide a little bit when it comes to defining the combinations, and I added a couple of additions over here on the left. I've added aids and human assistants, but most of us don't have human assistants when it comes to task management. We're not able to hire a administrative assistant. Instead, we follow the following path. So we start off using memory as an adolescent. We go to, and I'll explain the flow of this a little bit later. We go to using paper. Those of us who are in our 40s, 30s, I don't think people in their 20s pick paper up as their first choice. But we realize that our memory is faulty, and then we start using paper. Then we go to a simple task app. People started picking those up in the 2000s and to today. We trade in a simple task app like Google Keep for a complex task app like OmniFocus or Nasby that allows us to do some sorting between tasks. So they're dedicated task apps. And interestingly, as task volume increases, the calendar becomes our next choice of tools. And many of us make the transition from a task manager that doesn't take into account calendars and due dates to managing a calendar. So our attention shifts from just a list manager, a fancy database, to using our calendar, because our calendar has way more information about relative times, durations, synchronization between tasks. A calendar is the way to go when your concern shifts to all these temporal aspects of our tasks. And then finally, the one that I ran into after I wrote the first edition of my book, which caused me to write a second edition, is the shift to using an auto-scheduler. So the hypothesis here is that we make this journey. As task volume increases, we make this journey up from 1 to 6. And that the highest level that we currently know of is 6. Well, I can't say that once again that I traveled this road and it was all nice and smooth. The zigzags that I mentioned before happened between levels 4 and 6. So I became a time blocker in about the late 90s, early 2000s, started teaching time blocking. Then I moved back here to Jamaica and thought, oh my goodness, I think I've made a big mistake. So 5 years, 6 years after I started time blocking, I was in a struggle. And the struggle I thought had to do with my using a technique that was not working, that somehow I had made a mistake all those years before. No, it turns out I hadn't, but I switched from using a calendar of all tasks back to using a complex task app. And if you follow the logic of what I'm saying before, that wasn't the best move. It's kind of a dumb move, right? Because the logic of what I'm saying is that you need the right combination to deal with the right volume. So in essence, I made a mistake and I picked an approach that wasn't a match for my task volume unknowingly. And of course, it didn't work. Instead, I had a return, a doubling up of all the symptoms that I didn't want to experience. So it took me about a year maybe to realize that no, this is wrong. I went back to using a calendar of all tasks and then made some big adjustments to the way I managed and the way I time blocked. So this all happened in about 2005 to 6 as I struggled along, not knowing I couldn't compare one combination to the other. Didn't know why one was better than the other. And so that's I just explained it all in detail. And here's the invisible dynamic that I mentioned before. The essence of it is that the same symptoms show up, showed up for me that I thought I had gotten rid of. Okay, so why? Why did I have the same symptoms that I had? And I'd experienced them before, the same ones I'd mentioned of tasks disappearing. That's a big one for me. The sleep loss, the repetition. Why do they return? And it seems as if you haven't made any progress. Well, let's draw an analogy. So let's imagine that you have a friend and you don't know this friend all that well. You've never been to his or her house, don't know what the layout of the land is like, but you've met them at work perhaps. And they know that you love gardening. And they also know that you have access to all kinds of moving equipment because your father perhaps owns a construction company. So they send you a quick text at the last moment on Friday night and they say, listen, I need to move some dirt tomorrow. Bring your stuff with you, okay? And this is at 11 something at night. So you can't, too late to text back. Maybe you see it in the morning. And as you get the text, you're wondering, hang on, should I bring my gardening tools? Or should I ask my relative, my dad, I guess, to bring his tractor? Which one is it? What's the volume of dirt that needs to be moved? Is it like small from one pot to another? Or are they trying to tear down a hill that's right behind them and they need mega help? And you're wondering, hold on, I don't know what tool to bring because I don't know the volume of dirt they're trying to move. So the corollary of that is that different strokes for different folks, I guess. not the best one. But it's more a case of horses for courses. If you ever heard that term, some horses are better running short course races, others for long ones. Tool should match the volume. Well, maybe that's also the reason why these unwanted symptoms pop up, which is they pop up whenever your volume increases to the point where it exceeds your current capacity. So in other words, the exact same symptoms show up whenever your task volume becomes higher than your capacity. And that's true whether you're at the memory level, the simple app level, the paper level, simple app, complex app, calendar, or auto scheduler. And this is what drives us crazy. Because For simple problems like a headache, the answer might always be, oh, Advil, or some kind of painkiller. Oh, let me take a painkiller. Simple problem, simple solution. But I'm arguing or I'm describing a complex problem, and a complex problem that throws off the same symptoms, but actually comes from a different kind of volume. So how many times does this happen in our career? It's tough to say, but let me introduce you to a couple of definitions that will help us understand. So this is a definition that we've come up with here at Two Time Labs. It's that of a time demand, which is an internal individual commitment to complete an action in the future. It's different from a task. So a task, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a piece of work that's been given to someone, a job for someone to do. So the definition, this dictionary definition, or our everyday way of using the word task, the source of it or the ownership of the task, we mix it up in the way that we talk about tasks. However, time demand, if you look at that bottom, that very bottom definition, it's always defined by someone's agency or ownership. So it's always defined by who came up with it in the first place. So a time demand is always mine. It can never be created by someone else. So it can't be given to me either. A time demand is always something that I commit to psychologically, internally. And we go through a predictable, according to the psychological research, a predictable path when it comes to time demands, which is someone teaches us the concept of time when we're about 7 or 8, always taught. Then around age 9 to 12, we start creating time demands. Again, these are psychological objects, so they're happening inside of us, commitments to ourselves. And then somewhere around teenage years, we start to notice that if we want to get big things done, we've got to have some practices, some habits that allow us to keep these time demands alive, because they have a very short shelf life and it's very easy for them to slip away. So we emerge into our 20s or so with some kind of system that we've taught ourselves for managing time demands. So research says this is kind of the flow that we all go through. And again, we're self-taught. So I started off saying I wanted to help you reinterpret your history, that what's brought you to this point in your life is the same start that we all had, where you went through this process of developing and self-teaching yourself a system for managing time demands. So now you are where you are. How can you understand the 5 transformations? So here's what they are. From 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 6. Very simple. 5 big transformations that we human beings make as task volume increases. Of course, we don't all make it because this is not being taught. If we're lucky, we may look into the idea that we need different approaches as task volume increases. If we're lucky, someone will tell us that, oh no, Francis, you can't go back to a combination that works for lower task volume. No, you need to move ahead and either improve what you're doing or look for a new solution. But we don't know this information. So I'm going to talk about the 5 transformations in a little bit more depth. And I'm going to break it down in these areas. As you see, we'll dig into each one, because unfortunately, they're all different. They're all weird in their own weird way. So the transition from memory to paper. So you realize that you need to somehow hold on to these slippery time demands. So you start to pick up a piece of paper. The reason that you're picking it up, this particular transformation, is because your memory is faulty and you have a problem in managing what's called prospective memory, which is the memory that covers time demands. The symptoms that you see as you hit your limits is that one of them is that you forget time demands, or you forget about tasks. They slip through the cracks. And then the stressors are what makes it worse in the moment, are energy, age, skill, motivation. They all help us to forget. Anytime one of those goes up, then we forget more of them. And then one of the things that we need to learn in order to implement this transformation from level 1 to level 2 is to manage paper. So one of the quirks about this particular level is that the truth is you will never ever escape the use of memory. Some of us maybe are almost there, but many of the books that are written today, Getting Things Done, for example, is about making that transition from level 1. So transition from level 2 is the one from paper to a simple task app. And once again, the limiting resource, not again, but there is a limiting resource at all of these levels. In this case, it's paper. So there's some who are able to manage paper, and I'm not one of them. I left a diary of, I think, some of my most precious thoughts, calendar, reflections, all kind. I know some of the things it had in it because I left it on an airplane and never got it back. So the problem with paper is that it can be lost or stolen, or it can deteriorate, or it can get wet, or it can be burned. And so there's a problem with paper. And the symptom would be that you are going back to using memory to supplement the paper, or you have to use your memory when the paper gets lost. And the stressors could be that you have to travel, which means you have to carry the paper with you, which means that you have to develop a habit of carrying some physical object that you might not necessarily have a habit of carrying. And the maintenance is that you have to carry the new maintenance. The new process that you need to learn is that you need to protect a phone. So carrying a phone and updating an app is a part of the transition that you need to make as you go from level 2 to level 3. Some refuse to do it, of course, because they say, I don't want to even have a phone with me. Some people don't want to go through the pain of carrying. A smartphone only holds its charge for a day or two. So they have to learn how to charge, which is for some people an annoyance. They stay with a feature phone, an old style phone. And a quirk is that you may still use paper in a rush. So in the moment, all that's there, your phone isn't with you, you find a piece of paper like a post-it note, and then you make an actual, capture it in a time demand on a piece of paper. And now you need to remember to transfer from the paper to the simple task app on your phone. So that's the second transformation. Very different than the first, right? So the third is different altogether. The third, from a simple task app like Google Keep to a complex task app like OmniFocus. So fortunately, you're still on the same physical device. But the reason that you're switching over is that you now have a very long, unsorted list of tasks in your simple task app. So they don't allow tagging the simple task apps. All they allow you to do is create basically one very long list. And as the list gets longer and longer and maybe gets past a screenful or two, you now have to actually spend more memory to manage it. And then comes some more of the unwanted symptoms that you thought you had already gotten over. In this case, maybe it's a feeling of overwhelm and feeling that you can't track your priorities. So a stressor could be that you're getting placed on a complex project and now you have to manage lots and lots of priorities. And using a simple task app is just very hard to do that. So the new maintenance activity you need to do with a complex task app is that you need to develop this new discipline of tags, using tags or contexts to manage these tasks. Okay. And then lastly, the quirk is that some people use a complex task app as a simple task app. So just having the complex task app is not by itself a guarantee of anything. It's how you actually use it, as I'm sure you realize. So the next transformation, number 4, is that of a complex app to a calendar of tasks. And once again, task volume increases and the method of tagging and prioritizing tasks in a complex task app starts not to be enough. Why? Well, as you add more tasks, the scarce resource stops being the ability to sort tasks. It starts to be time, the 168 hours that you have each week. As you keep adding more and more and more tasks, there's a new bottleneck. There's a new scarce resource. So you may notice as you get to that point that you have no free time, or that you have way more than 168 hours of work to do, and you want to get it all done in a week, including sleeping. And the specific symptom that tells you that it might be time to make that change is when you find yourself going through your lists over and over and over again to sort and sort and resort and resort and resort. And you spend all that time trying to find the right priority. But really, the limiting resource is not the priority per se. It's now time. So it's shifted. The increase in volume that you're now dealing with has caused the difference, and the difference in your attention, which now must go to time rather than priority. I'm saying it in very crude language because priority is also important, but that's the one that becomes important. So as you make the switch, you're now making, for many people, they would not contemplate this switch, but this is a switch to time blocking. And it's the reason why time blocking works so well for large volumes of tasks, at first anyway. And the new practice that you've got to pick up is creating a daily schedule and basically sticking to it. So that works in the beginning. And people who time block will tell you, in the beginning it was awesome because all of a sudden I was getting stuff done. And if you follow the research, it says that what gets scheduled gets done. There's research from Peter Goldwitzer at NYU and his colleagues that show that what he calls implementation intentions, essentially scheduling stuff to get it done, doubles and increases the probability of it getting done, as opposed to it being on a list. So that works in the beginning, and you're all happy until it stops working. And it stops working as you add more tasks, because the overhead that it takes to manage a calendar of tasks just becomes too hard. So some people view that overhead as a reason not to even start time blocking in the beginning. So they know that if on a given day, if you have disruptions, that all of a sudden you're going to have to go in and re-time block everything because the schedule you created at 8 has to be completely rejiggered by 10. And that becomes the new limiting resource. Keeping a full schedule current becomes overwhelming at high task volumes. It's easy when you have 5 tasks per day, or you have maybe 30 tasks to manage in total. But somewhere between 50 and 150, my anecdotal research says you got to think about making the switch. And auto-schedulers are specifically designed to take over the job of maintaining a calendar. And what they allow you to do is to press a button and completely re-optimize your calendar using AI in 2 or 3 seconds. So it frees you from the overwhelm and all of that maintenance work. So the thing that might drive you crazy to get to that point is that you get lots of disruptions. So if you have that experience and you're a time blocker, maybe an auto scheduler is for you. But you've also got to learn that there's also some brand new practices. Once again, new processes. You got to use an auto scheduler every day. And basically, you've got to train it as if it were a dumb robot that needs to be trained. And finally, the quirk, the little strange thing about this particular level, the last transformation, is that you could actually use both the calendar and your auto scheduler. And most people use both of them at the same time for different reasons. So those are the 5 major transformations. There are others, and here are a couple of them. One is that you go straight from using memory to using a simple task app, or even a complex task app, or even the calendar, or even auto scheduler. Not my recommendation, but in today's world, the younger ones among us probably may not pick up paper as their first transformation. They may go straight to level 3, straight to the use of a simple task app. And also, I mentioned before, you could bypass the entire journey that I just mentioned by hiring an administrative assistant who is highly trained, and they can do they're basically doing all of your auto scheduling for you. they can completely take over your calendar. And at the summit, we actually have an expert EA who's going to be sharing her techniques for doing that. Fascinating set of practices that she has to work with, let's say, a CEO, for example, that she's perfected over many years. So those are the 5 big ones. So how does this apply to you? Well, first, before we even talk about how to implement what I've just said, is to understand that there is not at all, a right level. I'm not advocating that you need to use an auto scheduler and that's the final solution. If you ever hear me say that, I don't even know what to think. It wouldn't be me if I were saying that, because that's not what the data shows. The data shows that you need to find the right combination for the right volume, and that you are idiosyncratic and you're human, and that depends a great deal on you, not the solutions that other people have invented, or the apps, or the devices, or the best administrative assistants that are out there. So there is no right level. There is only the level that works for your task volume and the number of unwanted symptoms you're experiencing. So there's no need to upgrade. So don't hear what I'm saying as if I'm telling you, oh no, you got to come to the time blocking summit and you got to do time blocking and everything else is wrong. And if you're not doing it, then there's something wrong with you. No. And finally, this is not the wrong place to say, oh, I need to be using the best tools because I'm the best. This is not the time to be competitive and say, I got to move to level 6 as fast as possible. That can also get you in trouble. The point is, you want to own the level that you're at and use the right level of right combination that would help you to be effective and take away the unwanted symptoms. However, there's a caveat. The caveat is that if you're not retired yet, if you're in the workforce and got some years ahead of you, you still have a career in which you're going to be working, your task volume will increase. So it's part of the dynamic that I mentioned before, which is that as we gain success in any given combination of behaviors and apps, our natural tendency is to add more tasks. Now, the best way to do that is with the knowledge that I'm sharing today, which is that you'll need to change your approach, change your chosen combination, and to look for unwanted symptoms that let you know when the time is coming and the time is ripe. So that's not a pressure that comes from technology or the world. It really is one that comes from inside. And time demands, as I said, they're generated by you. You will keep creating more time demands as you gain more capacity. It's just the human thing to do. We just aren't, my experience is that we're just not satisfied getting to a particular level and say, okay, I won't create any more time demands per week I'm going to stay at this level. No, we love the feeling of being able to accomplish more. So then we start programming more commitments. Okay, so here are the steps I recommend you go through. One is to, what level are you currently at? So I don't recommend that you jump to the next level immediately, but you actually ask another question. How many unwanted symptoms are you experiencing? If you're not experiencing any, don't change anything. Just be aware and be prepared for the time that comes when they show up. But right now, if they're not there, don't change a thing. However, here's the caveat. Do you think there'll be an increase? Are you up for a promotion? Is your family going to have a couple of kids in the next couple of years? Is there a big project that you're about to go on? Or is there a hobby that you're involved in that's taken off? Do you want to start a side hustle, a side business? Those could all be drivers of a big jump in time demands. And no, you've got to be wary and maybe even prepare yourself for, or even, forget about preparing yourself for the unwanted symptoms. You could prepare yourself in advance of the unwanted symptoms that you imagine are coming. So how do you prepare yourself if you need to make this shift? Well, at the core of all the work we do here at Two Time Labs and woven into the summit is this notion of ETAPS. And I won't go into it here. It's covered actually in the materials that Ray just mentioned, because I went over this in detail at the summit, at the Productivity Summit last October. But very quickly, you start with an evaluation where you are now. You set some targets of where you want to be. And this is with respect to behaviors, apps, devices, routines. Then once you set some of these targets, you plan ways to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And you support the change with everything that would help you to be effective in making the transition. So that's enough to make the transition and the change. And I see we have a few minutes left, and I have I think 2 slides. And you had a feeling you wanted to make the change that perhaps we've been talking about. If you had that feeling, my recommendation is you follow the 3 steps. You reinterpret your history, understand it in this new light. You understand the transformations that go with increasing task volume, and you implement it by owning whatever level that you're at, anticipating what's coming in the future, and following the ETAPS process to make some changes. So I want to invite you to a couple of things. One, of course, is the Mighty Taskers community. And this community is the host of the Time Blocking Virtual Summit. It's very similar to the community that you have here, except that all we focus on are the transitions between level 4 and level 5 and level 5 and level 6. Those are the 2 major transitions. And really, that's what the Time Blocking Virtual Summit is really focused on. If you have so many tasks that a complex task app is not able to manage them, and you are experiencing these unwanted symptoms, and you've considered time blocking, or maybe you've even tried it and maybe it didn't work, or maybe you've tried it and you think that the time is right to take it to the next level, those are all good reasons to join us in the free Time Blocking Summit. The URL, as you can see, is timeblocking.summit.info. And I see Ray is back in, and my invitation is out. I hope to see you there inside the Time Blocking Summit.
Wonderful. Thank you, Francis. And so I just had a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of, posit to you and see if we couldn't get a little further clarification on it. So the first one, as you're talking about these transformations, I always think about the idea that someone is misaligned and unaware. So maybe they're using, I hate to use the word wrong, but they're using, a misaligned system, misaligned approach with the particular set of time demands, the task volume. And so how would someone who is potentially unaware, or maybe how do you introduce to someone who's unaware, you're third party to them being unaware that they're not using the right approach? And how do you help them transition?
Well, first is to point out the unwanted symptoms. So they've got to be very real. And if they're only incidental and they're not pressing, then there's no need for the person to change. I'm really talking about pressing symptoms. So the wrong level would come from them having these things that they don't want. So the way to figure it out is to do this evaluation that I talked about in the ETAPS process. And the more expert they are at the evaluation, the better they will be at focusing on the 20% of behaviors that produce the 80% of the results they want. Because by and large, this is what I've observed. Most people are doing the right things, that 80% of what they're doing is right. There's a 20% that they need to focus on that they're not doing right. So the evaluation is the way to zero in on the 20% so that you get the 80% of the result from the 20%. But that takes a particular level of self-learning, self-diagnosis. I mean, as I said, without the self-diagnostic ability, what I did was I followed, what I was reading. I read an article, everybody else was doing it. It was a good book. And without it, I was lost. What I really needed to do was to develop my ability to diagnose my current symptoms and track them back to the behaviors. Like I said, we're not talking about a simple system like like filling a bottle with water. This is more like your car. And, the story that I just gave, if my car couldn't start and I go to change a tire because I think, oh, well, tire changing a tire is easy and I know how to do that and everybody else is doing it. In a complex system like that of a car, if you're not a good diagnostician, you can waste a lot of time fixing the wrong symptoms.
Totally understood. Totally understood. So you talked about the idea of transitioning from kind of that fifth and sixth step to auto schedulers. What are some auto schedulers that are out there on the market that that you've used and maybe that you recommend? Maybe not one specific one, but maybe just a few that are out there that do this kind of machine learning technology.
Actually, not machine learning. They use what's called narrow AI, which is the sort of a very narrow robotic. They don't actually learn from past data, which is why they have to be trained so heavily. But the one I use is called SkedPal, and others that exist out there are, there's 8 of them, only 8 of them that we've identified. And I can't even remember all 8 off the bat, but Focuster, Sorted 3, Future Render, Flux Speed Schedule, Time Hero. The latest one that we've identified is called Butleroy. And then there's a new one that just came out whose name, it's not even out yet. That we asked them to come on to the summit and share what they've done. They said, we're not quite ready yet. Hold on, they're still on product hunt. So they're not quite in production yet. So I can't remember the name of the newest one. And that happened, I think in December that they actually came out on product hunt.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, it's just good to give people some suggestions of different apps that they can go check out and see if those are things that are, if they're at that point in their journey,
Right.
if they want to look at some of the options. I think SkedPal is a good first start, and then they can look at these others as well.
Yeah,
I
we
know.
actually, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
We actually provide a comparison. We did a comparison about a year ago, and if folks who attend the summit can access that comparison, they'll see a table and all of the criteria that Dr. Melanie Wilson and I used to compare the 6 auto schedulers that existed at the time, the first known comparison between them. And people have said it's really useful. They may not agree with our conclusion, which is fine, but the attributes that we looked at in depth are the ones that people want to consider for themselves.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I wanted to just put in this final plug for the time blocking summit that is coming up on March 5th through the 7th, and I'll actually be giving a session on both active and passive tracking of time. I think one of the huge or the most important aspects to me in understanding how time demands work in Francis's language is understanding how we use our time. And there are really great techniques out there to be able to, techniques and software to be able to understand that. So I'm looking forward to presenting those 2 sessions at the Time Blocking Summit. So join me, register for free, and join Francis for the summit with me. So that being the case, thank you, Francis, for joining me here for this little impromptu session. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully you all got something out of it. And I'm going to, let's see, stop this. And wonderful. So I hope you all have enjoyed the session. Feel free to ask questions, post questions in the comments inside of the Personal Productivity Club event. And I'm going to try and do more of these webinars. Maybe not impromptu. I'll probably schedule more of these going forward. But hope to see you at the Time Blocking Summit. Thank you again, Francis Wade from 2Time Labs, and we'll see you all later. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.